Near mint condition, the home of collected editions.
That cover's so awesome.
Absolute format is the best way to own this store. Time to empty those wallets and fill those shelves.
Happy Monday, all you minties. Uncanny Omar here from Near Mint Condition, the home of collected editions. And welcome to your first look at the Blade, the Early Years Omnibus from Marvel Comics. So let's take a look at this together. Before going any further, I do want to thank David Gabriel and the fine folks at Marvel for sending us an advance copy of this omnibus. This omnibus is due out in the direct market and book market on November 14th. And speaking of direct market and book market, what we're looking at here is one of the direct market covers. And this is the one that's supplied by Gray Morrow. On the left-hand side is your standard edition cover, and that's the one that's supplied by Dave Wilkins. That's the one that's going to be available everywhere. On the right-hand side is the one supplied by Gil Kane, and that is the other direct market cover. The two direct market covers are only available at places like cheapgraphicnovels.com, waltzcomicshop.com, comicsbugle.com, diamondbreakcollectors.com, organicpricebooks.com, In-Stock Trades, Tales of Wonder, DCBS, and of course your local comic book store. While the cover on the left, the standard edition, is available everywhere. But underneath the dust jacket, everything is the same. So let's take a closer look at this. We have Blade, the Early Years Omnibus. Marvel Preview presents, of course, this being the cover. And this being a big story for Blade. And here we have the spine of the book, Marvel Omnibus, Blade the Early Years, Wolfman and Colin, and then that picture of Blade down there. And then the covers of the stories that are collected in here. The Complete Early Adventures of Blade, Marvel's horror icon, collected for the first time. And that is true. There's never really been a collection quite like this one. Even though there's a lot of double dipping, and I mean a lot of double dipping with this particular title in case you have that omnibus, and that is, of course, The Tomb of Dracula, which I'll talk a little bit about what's collected in here in a bit. Parental advisory, and that is true mainly for the Vampire Tale stories, and then, of course, the epic Return of Tomb of Dracula, which I'll talk a little bit about what kind of parental advisory. The Marvel logo, and then, of course, the ISBN with the price, and the retail price being $100. Let's look underneath the dust jacket, but first let's look at the flaps here. They call me Blade, the Vampire Killer. He's a little bit edgier back then. And then a little bit about the creators on the right-hand side. Over here, you'll see some of the highlights of the stories collected in here. Now, this is the logo that you're using, so the wooden stake, Blade the Vampire Slayer Omnibus, Blade the Early Years, with that picture down there by Colin, Wolfman and Colin, and the Marvel Omnibus logo, and then the two wooden stakes here. Okay, we are going to open this up, and I'm going to tell you the kind of stories that are going to be collected in here, as well as show off, of course, the artwork. Okay, let's go ahead and crack this book open. Here's your end sheets, Blade the Vampire Slayer, the Early Years. And then what is collected in here, which we'll talk about in a second. And the stakes, and then people behind this particular collection. This classic cover right here to his first appearance, Blade the Early Years. And this is actually the table of contents, the way this looks, or I'm sorry, the credits and table of contents. It reminds me of the Marvel Masterworks treatment. So you have the writers, mainly being Marv Wolfman, of course, but you also have Steve Gerber and Chris Claremont, Roger Stern writing those Doctor Strange issues, Marcus McLaurin bringing him back in the pages of Marvel Comics Presents, and then the pencilers being, oh my gosh, Gene Colan's artwork in here. Just so phenomenal and beautiful. P. Craig Russell. This is early P. Craig Russell when he was just Craig Russell. Tony DeZuniga, Rico Rival, Dan Green, Steve Lealoha, Malcolm Davis, and then your inkers like Jack Abel and Tom Palmer and Tony DeZuniga. With Al Williamson coming back for the later Tomb of Dracula stories. The letterers right here. And then, I just have to say the letter, Denise Vladimir. Is there anybody else that could have lettered that book? That's freaking awesome with that last name. And then Joe Rosen being one of my favorite letterers of all time. The colorist, Petra Goldberg, Tom Palmer, Michelle Wolfman, Bob Sharon, Patty Cockrum, and your editors at the time. And then your table of contents, where it all begins with Tomb of Dracula number 10, making it his first appearance. His name is Blade. And this is where they had to change the dialogue here to make sure that it was approved by the Comics Code. Drop that girl Dracula or this wooden knife. I think the original dialogue was, "will go straight through your heart." Now, what is collected in here, because the solicits are a little bit off, in here is the Tomb of Dracula stories number 10, 12 through 14, 24, 30, 41 through 43, 45, 51, 53, and 58 in their entirety, as well as Adventure into Fear number 24, Vampire Tales 8 through 9, Marvel Previewed 3 and 8, Doctor Strange 61 and 62 and 67, material for Marvel Comics Presents number 64, all of the Tomb of Dracula, the 1991 series 1 through 4, and that's very important because that's what's left out of some of the solicits I've seen, and then material from Tomb of Dracula 17 through 19, 21 through 44, 46 through 50, and 52. So what is contained in here? So this shows the early appearances of Blade. Now, I will say this, if you've never read a Blade comic book and you're coming in from the movies, this is a little bit different because this is before the movies. This is before the Spider-Man animated series. So this is before he actually had his name of Eric Cross Brooks and the Daywalker or the Dampier. This is more of Blade. I think even Frank Blade was towards later on here. And his origin is a little bit different. His origin is that of a young baby that is born to a mother that was bitten by a vampire. She was part of this brothel, so it's got a little bit of a change in his origin when they later retconned it. Not too much. And the baby's still born. However, as you find out, he's not just a vampire killer going after Dracula and going after Deacon Frost, the man who he blames for killing his mother. As you find out in an origin issue, when he gets bitten by Dracula, he becomes immune to turning into a vampire. And here's where you learn that he is more than just a human being. He has all these extra abilities, this extra strength that comes from being born of a woman that died at childbirth, but he's born with some vampire blood. Not really putting it out there that he's half vampire or that he's a daywalker, as we later call him, but more of like, oh, he's got these extra abilities that kind of came with the territory, and now he's hunting vampires. Later on, it's thought that maybe he hates vampires because he's part vampire. And of course, later on, the big retcon that and it's not much of a retcon, that he is a daywalker, that he's partially vampire. Now, through the early years, as we have here, he does make appearances in the pages of Tomb of Dracula, and there's Saffron right there, his lady, who plays a big part in his early appearances. And here he's joined by a few characters from the Tomb of Dracula series, such as Rachel Van Helsing, Frank Drake, who's a direct descendant of Dracula, and Quincy Harker. These three people, along with Blade, go on a journey across the world, not just in America, but through Europe, to kill Dracula. And of course, there's always this thing. This is the origin story right here of telling his newfound friends, even though they're not really friends, they're kind of like just allies, about the character of Deacon Frost and what he did to his mother and how he just hates vampires. And so they travel across the world to try to rid the world of vampires, and by taking down the main vampire, and that is Dracula. And there are stories in here where, okay, they kill Dracula, now what? And then, of course, they bring Dracula back, or he's not that easy to kill. Now, the way this is mapped, you may notice, is that some of the stories are not complete, or they may seem like they're not complete, but we're focusing on just Blade. We're not focusing on Dracula. So these stories have been collected before in the pages of the Tomb of Dracula Omnis and in the pages of the complete collections and now the Marvel Masterworks. In this, we're just focusing on every appearance that Blade had through the pages of Tomb of Dracula. So if Blade wasn't in it but like one issue just for 1 page or 2 pages, then the rest of the issue is omitted. Now, that might not be for everybody, but we've seen these kind of collections before, whether in the pages of the Black Panther Omnibus or the Namor Omnibus. or no, I'm sorry, not Namor Omnibus, the Namor Epic Collections, where they just focus on the early appearances of these characters, and if it's not that important to the story, they just leave out a lot of the pages. So we see this throughout the first few issues collected in here, going back and forth. And eventually, they're not just hunting. This is one of my favorite stories right here. This is where Dracula is just telling different stories about how he's almost defeated. This is from the pages of the Tomb of Dracula number 30. And one of the stories, of course, features Blade. Now, they didn't have to collect everything else, but they figure it's important to have the rest of the story collected, as well as the Blade story when they first met and who he is. The other thing I was going to say about this is that the earlier adventures of Blade, when he first shows up, he definitely has this dialogue that is outdated. In the way that, but I do love the way he talks to Dracula, though. It's like he shows Dracula no respect at all. And that's one of the things that I enjoyed about the early appearances of Blade. And it's really interesting to go see how Marv Wolfman tackles that when people ask him about that, right? Like, there's some stereotypes to the dialogue, and he said, well, that just comes with the territory of being a writer. I wanted to introduce this character that was a black man hunting vampires. He was from England, so a lot of the early appearances have that kind of stereotypical talk that you'll see in early comics. When he brought him back, so he took a break from writing the character, when he brought him back later on in the pages of the Tomb of Dracula, because you'll see him missing for a few issues, and then he comes back, he had a better understanding of who the character was. And I thought that was really interesting. If you read that interview from Marv Wolfman talking about the growth of not just the character, but also of him as a writer and being more comfortable with the said character, because he thought the character could stand out above all the other characters he introduced through the pages of the Tomb of Dracula. And here we have the Adventure in the Fear issue. This is when he fights Morbius. And this is a really interesting issue because Morbius is going through his own world traveling things. But when he fights Blade, Blade finds out, oh, wait a minute, this dude is not just a vampire. There's something really off with him. Now, they don't, of course, just fight Dracula, but that is most of the Tomb of Dracula when you're focusing on that character because of the title. But when we get to the Vampire Tales, we finally have some solo stories of Blade in here. This is where he ends up fighting the Legion of Hell. And these are, of course, black and white and a little more mature. But they don't feature Dracula. They fight him, he's here fighting different types of creatures of the night, not just vampires, but other creatures. And we see more of him in here with some gorgeous artwork. And I'll show you some of this. Oh my gosh, this Gene Colan painted pencil. Oh, it's so beautiful. This right here is the night that Josie Harper died. This is a really cool story that comes from Marvel Previews because Vampire Tales got canceled. So it was supposed to go through Vampire Tales, but instead they saved it for this. And this tells the story of Blade accidentally killing a young girl, thinking that he was killing a vampire. Saffron, again, playing a big important part through this. And this also featuring these new characters that aren't really Dracula, but of course all have ties to vampires. Now, this is a story that was done by Chris Claremont, and then Tony DeZuniga doing a lot of the artwork in here too. But he's implicated in her death. So, but it also shows the story of Saffron and how she is part of the plot by the Legion of the Dead, or the Legion from Hell. This is the art I wanted to show off here. This is why Gene Colan has become one of my favorite artists. So after that story is done, it's a 4-part story, or broken down into 4 parts. We get this story right here by Marv Wolfman and Gene Colan, who, of course, Gene Colan was doing the art here, but a lot of the inks are done by different people until Tom Palmer comes in, and then you really see his art just fleshed out. But when he's inking his own stuff, in this black and white, it definitely has that painted pencil feel. It's just absolutely stunning. I wish he had a chance to have done more of this type of art throughout his run on Blade, or I guess Tomb of Dracula, rather. And then we see him return back to the pages of the Tomb of Dracula, when Dracula again is brought back from the dead by Harold, and the rest of the crew have to put him back into the world of the undead. But when you have, like I said, the title being Tomb of Dracula, how can you keep him dead? Gene Colan supplying the artwork, and beautiful artwork through here. Eventually you do see the end of the title, and Blade take a break from Marvel Comics and come back a little bit later in the pages of Doctor Strange. So this is the stories I love to see collected one day in omnibus format. This is Uncle Raj, and this is the first time this is collected in an omnibus format. I believe I didn't get the third Tomb of Dracula omnibus, so I don't know if this was in there or not, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it makes me wish that we'd have a volume 3 of Doctor Strange, the classic stuff. But this is when Doctor Strange gets the help of characters like Hannibal King and Frank Drake and Blade to go after Dracula one last time. Until the next time, right? So this is a big storyline. And then we don't see Blade for a while, and the next time you see him is in the Marvel Comics Presents Wolverine and Ghost Rider, but it's really Blade. Just a short little story about going on a talk show, talking about how vampires are fake, they're not real, all of his life has just been a lie. Saffron is still a big part of it, and of course, if you've been reading the most recent run of Blade and the stories with his daughter, then you know Saffron plays a big important part. And then we get this beautiful book, The Tomb of Dracula, Day of Blood, Night of Redemption. It's a 4-issue story arc that came out in 1991. You have Gene Colan and Al Williamson working on artwork together, and of course Marv Wolfman. This tells the story of Frank Drake and how years after the defeat of Dracula, because we hadn't seen him for a long time, we see him happily married. He's now married to this young lady named Marlene, and Marlene is in therapy with a Russian doctor because they're trying to save their marriage. And we see him and her just connect. And you're wondering the whole time, like, why isn't he with Rachel? Well, as you find out after the defeat of Dracula, you get to find some things out about some of these characters in the past. So in here, Frank Drake and a couple of other characters are reunited with Blade because Dracula is returning. By the way, that is a horribly placed word bubble. Come on now. What were we doing? These were printed, by the way, in the Epic line, I want to say. So these have a little bit more of a mature feel where they can get away with a little more violence. And it features artwork from Gene Colan in the 90s. So you'll see the evolution of an artist. You know, where he was and where he is, well, in 1991. You'll see appearances by other characters from the Tomb of Dracula comics in here. But of course, this is included in here because Blade plays a big important part. And Blade during this era is changed a little bit because this is right around the era when we were starting the Rise of the Midnight Suns, when Johnny Blaze had taken a backseat and letting Danny Ketch be the new Ghost Rider, and that opened up a whole new world of Night Stalkers. So you had the return of a lot of these characters like Hannibal King and Frank Drake, and of course Blade being in the Night Stalker series. So by now Blade has, changed a little bit, and then eventually we got his new origin story, and he had his own miniseries. But this is a 4-issue story arc that ends this omnibus. And again, beautiful artwork here by the phenomenal Gene Colan, and some creepy imagery, the way that he draws the character of Dracula. Like his face is just falling apart. It's melting in Al Williamson's inks. Oh, Laverne Kindersiski is the colorist on here. It's beautiful colors. All right, let's get to the extras here. So you have house hats, you have original page art here. This is the cover I was talking about. So the original dialogue was, "Drop that girl Dracula or this wooden knife goes right through your heart." And they changed it to get it passed by the comics code to "Drop that girl Dracula or this wooden knife will finish you off forever." Which I guess has the same effect, just not as edgy. Some original artwork in here, including covers and original pages. And what I would love to see collected is more of a 90s era, and then of course a modern era of Blade. Those Night Stalkers issues, come on, we gotta get something. We gotta get like a Ghost Rider Danny Ketch omnibus. And that will kick off all these other characters, from the Darkhold to the Spirits of Vengeance to the Night Stalkers, when they I guess there was a revival of horror comics again in the 90s. These are beautifully painted covers right here for the Tomb of Dracula, the 90s series, and original art. And then this is a feature from Marvel Age 105 talking about the revival of Tomb of Dracula. And the Dave Wilkins cover here, in case you got the direct market, so you still have it here. 720 pages. Let's look at the binding. And there is that eye. Not that much of an eye, and not that there's a lot of spread pages through here. We'll actually look at one. But first, let's talk about the paper stock here. This one's printed at the iMac printer. And for people that are wondering, like, if this one has a strong smell, I don't smell anything. Not on this one. But as far as the bleed through, the paper stock is, it's been this thick for a while now, so it's not thinner. It's not like the JMS, but there is some bleed through, as you can probably tell through white pages or lighter pages. I wanted to bring this up so you can see the cover coming through from the other side. Maybe if you're looking for it, you can even see maybe some of the frame from the opposite side, like right here, like screaming. Maybe see it. But I did want to point that out, that there is a little bit of bleed through coming from the other side. All right, let's look at some spreads here. So this is the way the spread pages look. Very minimal gutter loss right there. And there's not, honestly, a lot of spread pages through this omnibus. So we cover the bleed through, we cover the way the book lays over. Yeah, that's it. Bring me some more Blade and Omni format, please. That, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this omnibus, don't forget to check out our sponsors.
If you're in Europe and you're interested in buying these books, definitely check out Walt's Comic Shop in Berlin, Germany. They have the cheapest pre-order prices, flat shipping rate of €12 for all EU countries, emails answered within 24 hours, waltscomicshop.com, and you can use the code nearmintcondition at checkout and get free shipping for all EU countries with your first order over €40. That's Walt's Comic Shop, your reliable source for omnis and premium collected editions in Europe. Ding!
CheapGraphicNovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget that CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more.
And that was the content, the page count, and build of this book. Let me know in the comments down below if you plan on picking it up, if you've never read the stories in here, if you have the Tomb of Dracula Omnis, if you're going to keep those and also get this, and if you want to see a Blade, the modern years omnibus like I do. Leave all those comments down below. If you have any questions, leave them down below. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications. Everyone stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.